Hey there everybody, I am Jeff, this is Tabletop Toolbox, and thank you for joining me here on episode number 52 of the Weekly Ratchet. In this episode, I'm going to be telling you all about the... What is that noise? Hey there everyone, welcome back to the Weekly Ratchet. If this is your first time joining us here, well then hey, this is a board game themed variety show hosted by me, Jeff, and I like to do a bit of conversations here about games that I've recently received, games I've recently played, and of course, the question of the week. So thank you for joining me here on the channel. A couple of things to cover at the top of the show here. I will mention that yes, I am on TikTok. I put out my first TikTok video ever last week. Can't say I was super fond of the process. Can't say I'm super interested in the platform, but I do kind of understand that if you want to kind of grow the brand, that unfortunately is the place to do it. And that is evident in the fact that my first TikTok got like 8 views. Woohoo. That same video out on YouTube as a short got 500 views. Although it didn't really seem to translate into a lot of new people here on the episode, but that's okay. Let's see what happens. So if you are so inclined, and if you do the whole TikTok thing, feel free to go out and give us a little bit of a like or a little bit of a bump, whatever you can do, I would certainly appreciate it. Other than that, I will mention that I did not get the Dice Tower gig. They were advertising for a part-time video content creator to teach games. Tom ended up going with someone else. I don't know who. I'm kind of curious to find that out, as I'm sure everyone else on that channel is. A little bit of a bummer, but I'm going to also share this. I'm going to go ahead and put the link to the one video that I made as kind of like a demo, the At the Gates of Loyang teach, out on the channel as a link in this video description. I cannot make it a public video because I filmed that video as Jeff, your tabletop technician out on the Dice Tower. So in the interest of not conflicting with them, I'm going to just kind of keep it unlisted, but you can look for the link in this video's description. Go and check it out. Let me know what you think. Tell me if, after you watch that relatively short video, do you feel like you know how to play the game? Do you have any, useful criticism to try and improve, what I did there? Because I do think that that is an avenue that I would like to explore here on the channel. I don't think I'm going to do the ultra super heavy games because I can't imagine what those take. And of course, there's also the whole challenge of, when a big game comes out, a real popular game comes out, everybody does teach videos. And so I don't necessarily just want to be a little blip on the radar. I want to be doing something that not everyone else is doing. But then obviously there's still that sort of timing issue. Anyways, enough about that. Go and check that out if you're so inclined. I did last week put out a unboxing video on the Critter Kitchen game. I did have some fun putting that together. That was a pretty straightforward unboxing video, so go ahead and check that out if you'd like. And then I will also go ahead and share that my next video, speaking of the Dice Tower, my next video on that channel is going up, I believe, this weekend. I took a look at that Project Gaia game. Not a great game, but hopefully a good video, and I hope the folks get to check that out. They did also mention, they mentioned this morning that they are moving. They're actually moving the Dice Tower from Miami to Fort Myers. Some folks may have seen that already, and I did reach out to Tom. They're expecting to have a good solid month of some downtime on the channel, and I wrote to see if I can kind of help fill that up with a little bit of content. So we'll see what comes out of that, if anything. Hey, I think that's it for some news and events. Let's go ahead and check out some recent deliveries. All right, another 2 games to share of recent deliveries. The first one was one that I was really looking forward to playing. I have already played it, and I'm not entirely convinced. This is Video Game Champion. This is from, I always forget the name of this, Arcane Wonders. I keep getting them and Renegade Games confused. I don't know why. But this is from Arcane Wonders. I didn't also realize that it is a Dice Tower Essentials game in that sort of Dice Tower Essentials lineup. And I'm not entirely sure why. This is a game in which you are playing you're basically a kid, and you're trying to beat a whole bunch of video games, and whoever gets to beat the most video games and make the most score off of playing and winning video games is the winner of this game. An interesting system. I've already played it actually a couple times, so I'll chat about that one here in a little bit. The next one is, this is the big one, folks. This is the one that I have been looking forward to for really a very, very long time. This is Galactic Cruise, and there is so much in this box that I only bothered to bring the lid out here for this segment. Was not about to tip that whole daggone thing up on its edge. Anyways, this is a very, very large rather heavy game. It is from TK King, as one of the lead designers, and I did not know this, but I believe he's involved in the game Carnegie, which I have not played in a long time. I got rid of my copy of Carnegie. It just didn't click with me, but I did check out the Paul Grogan video on how to play this, and it sounds really, really interesting. It definitely sounds up my alley in terms of theme and mechanisms, and we have a tentative schedule on the books to play this Thursday, so hopefully I will get to talk about this at length next week. Galactic Cruise. That's it for new games. So let's go ahead and get the question of the week. Okay, so maybe y'all sort of heard my grumbling last week when I mentioned only 2 people answering last week's question of the week, which of course was fine. I do think it was a bit of an obscure topic. That's all right. This week I have a ton of answers to get through, a ton of comments to get through. Last week I asked you to tell me your thoughts on reviewers, board game reviewers, who assign scores to games. What do you think about that? If I said a game's a 5 or a 2 or a 3 or a 7, what does that kind of mean to you? You're going to see that there's a lot of consistency in these answers, a lot of very similar responses. And in fact, as I was kind of writing out this script, I found myself typing a lot of the same words over and over and over again, which I just thought was interesting. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. It was just very interesting to see a lot of consistency in these answers. So I've grouped these together a little bit to try and save on time and to try and keep myself from just trying to, sort of ad hoc ramble about on a topic I agree with or we've already seen a bunch of times. Hopefully that'll get us through this fairly efficiently. I'm going to start off with Teshra, who said that he appreciates scores in games, but made a request to all reviewers, that being to add a link in their descriptions to an online reference to their scoring system. He chatted a bit about the BGG scoring system and then ended with a suggestion that reviewers don't need to tell viewers that their opinions might not be universal by saying things like, quote, "Your mileage may vary." Now, I think that the scoring criteria sort of list online is an interesting one. I do wonder how many folks would really be inclined to go out and then, sort of reference that resource. And as far as that other bit, I get what you're saying. And I've said this a lot in my own videos that, look, you may not agree with me, but also do kind of understand, if I may, we get an awful lot of clapback sometimes from folks who disagree with us. You've already played a game. I'm not saying you, but someone has already played a game. They already have an opinion on it, and they're going out into a review to see, do they think the same thing I think? And if we don't, then they feel the need to, berate us or yell at us or whatever. And I know this very well from games like, I don't know, Andromeda's Edge. And so I think that sometimes that's kind of like the Band-Aid on our review, right? Like if you don't like what we said, listen, we get it. You don't have to tell us that you disagree with us. We're giving our opinion, and you're there because you came to see our opinion. I didn't go to see someone else's opinion. I didn't ask for people's opinions on my review. And so I kind of feel like, hey, look, if you disagree, that's fine. You don't necessarily need to go out there and make a big stink about it. And sometimes I feel like if we kind of add that disclaimer, right? Your mileage may vary. Maybe it kind of heads off some of that conflict. Anyways, that's just my opinion on it. On that same note, Omar Hernandez said that scores are fine, but that he needs to understand the scale, adding that some reviewers are very clear about what a 5 means and how it differs from a 7 or 10. He added that establishing the scale is critical to a score being useful. And yes, we're going to see a lot of that, going forward, is people trying to sort of understand what those scores mean by having some familiarity with the reviewer themselves. On that note, Simulation Chris said that scores are good, but that context matters as well. He said he rarely gets to play games with more than 4 players, so giving a game a 10 because it plays great at 8 means nothing to him. And, I made that mistake a lot earlier in my sort of, hobby when I was getting to understand games for the first time and I was watching reviewers for the first time. And yes, someone would say, this game is just fantastic. And we had a ton of fun with the people that we played with. And then I get it and I realize I don't have those people to play with. Either I don't have that number of people to play with, or I don't have those type of gamers to play with. And I suddenly realized that I have all these games sitting on the shelf that might be fantastic games, but I'm never going to get to really realize their full potential. So I can certainly understand that. Mike Heller, a personal friend but a first-time poster here on the channel, said scores don't mean that much to him, that it depends on the reviewer. He finds that he often aligns with a particular reviewer, and if they like a game, he's more inclined to check it out. Again, we're going to see this a lot going forward, that it sort of takes an understanding of the reviewer themselves. So thanks for that comment, Mike. It's good to see you here on the channel. On that note, Wayne Kruger said that a score is good as long as the context is given as to how they reach that score. Just giving a number isn't helpful unless he feels like he's familiar with the reviewer. Again, more on that same sentiment. All right, Just Joe Blogs wrote a book in his comment, and I'm not going to be able to fit it all on the screen, but I'll paraphrase it here as best as I can. He started off saying that he doesn't care about numerical scores, then discussed the dilemma presented by a heavy boss battler game getting a higher score than an abstract game, but he himself personally loves abstract games, so what is he to do? He then said that what matters to him are all the words before the score and who said them, and ended with a personal ranking system he likes to use, blending preferences both to play and or own the game going forward. And I think that was pretty insightful. I think that it's, we sort of all have our own idea of, how does this game fit into my collection, especially if we have a collection, right? Is this a game that I really want to play again? Is it a game that I think owning it is going to give it more of a chance of getting played? Am I going to have it just because I really like it, but maybe I'm never going to get to play it? All those things sort of factor into our own opinion of a game, and I think it's important that we each sort of have that understanding of what a game really means to us and how it's really going to fit, into that list. So that was pretty helpful. These next four commenters all share very similar themes. Up first is Yukon Zach, who said that he needs to watch a reviewer a few times before he can relate their scores to his own, adding, "It's all relative." Rentless said he doesn't mind scores on reviews, but agrees that they are subjective, that other things matter more when deciding if a game is worth his time. Canuck Chuck said he needs to know the context of a score before it can be useful. He also agreed that knowing the reviewer helps to understand their scores. He also added that he can understand a score for components or maybe for difficulty, but that other than that, a description is far more useful than a number. And lastly, Yankee Hill 10, a first-time poster, said he thinks the value of the score depends on the reviewer, suggesting that different reviewers would give different scores to a game like Dinogenics based on their own gaming interests, adding that before the score can really mean much, you need to learn about a reviewer's tastes. And I'm obviously going to get some of my own thoughts here in a moment, but this is one reason why I don't give scores. Honestly, in my own head, I tend to feel like, I guess I just have the opinion that folks who are seeing my reviews are doing so for the first time, especially if I'm doing things like out on Kickstarter. But I just don't operate with the assumption that everyone who's watching my videos has seen me before and knows my taste. And so for me, I don't feel like it's helpful to give a number for that exact reason, as we're seeing everyone there saying that, listen, I need to know the reviewer before that score means anything to me. And so if I kind of have that impression that no one really knows me, then there's really no sense in giving a score, right? Anyways, again, my thoughts there. Tony Lawhorn echoed the idea of familiarity with a reviewer before a score can be useful, then added that in his written reviews, he provides two scores, one geared towards gamers and the other towards families or non-gamers. And I thought that was a really interesting approach, and I'm actually kind of curious, Tony, which factors make up the difference in those scores? Like, how do you kind of distinguish? Like, what makes it maybe score one way for a family game? Not necessarily like why would it score better or worse in one category or another, but what specific criteria of a game splits that difference for you, if that makes any sense. I'm curious. Ty McDonald took a different approach, not so much talking about scores, but talking about negative reviews and how they are beneficial to an audience, even if they're not beneficial to a designer or a publisher. He said, however, that he wished content creators would try to be objective about a game's appeal to different people when giving a score. Now, for those who may not know, Ty McDonald is a designer. He made the game The Last Command, which is one of my favorite games, quite frankly, to come out here in the past couple of years. And I think mine should be shipping pretty soon, and I'm really looking forward to it. But Ty's stance is a very valid one, and I've tried to do that myself when I'm doing some of these videos, in that, look, a dice chucking game or a big luck-driven game may not be my type of thing, but especially if I'm doing a Kickstarter video, and I've learned this over maybe the past year and a half of doing these videos, is that I have to really look at it from the perspective of all gamers. If someone is on a Kickstarter page and they've decided to click on my video, they're interested in that game. And it's not necessarily up to me to tell them not to be interested in that game or why I don't like the game. It's really my purpose to tell them about the game, give them as much information about it, how it plays, how it works, what it looks like, of course, and anything else in between, so that they can then make a better decision for themselves. Do I want to put money down on this? So I think that is a very valid request to take an objective approach. I'm actually going to talk about this more here in just a moment in more detail on a very, very different subject, but that we have to be able to understand that just because the game is not for us doesn't mean it's not for anybody. These next two commenters cared a little bit less about scores. Board Halfling said that he doesn't usually care about a score on a review, that he listens more to the description, to the details about the game. Also, Jeff Foxwell said that numbers are subjective, suggesting something akin to a kiss, marry, kill, or in his instance, a buy it, try it, or forget it. And I like that idea. I don't disagree with that idea. I can say that for me personally, I don't like to tell people what to do. I don't like to take a stance of, you should do this, or you should definitely do this. When I used to play a lot of video games, I looked for reviews on places like Amazon. I got so annoyed when reviewers would say, don't buy this game, it's trash. And it's like, look, don't tell me what to do. I'll make my own decisions for myself. Tell me about the game. Tell me why is it trash? What is really wrong with it in your perspective that then might sway me to make that same decision. I will say that one game as an example of that is the game of Arcs, where there are plenty of reviews out there from people saying this game is absolutely incredible. Buy it right now. You got to have this game. It must be in everyone's collection. And I hate that stuff too. Like, what game should everybody have? Screw you. I'll make my own decisions. But that is a game where, through a lot of research and a lot of listening to people and looking at reviews, even talking to friends who have played it, I have decided that Arcs is a game that not only should I not buy, but I don't even really want to play it, because I just feel like everything that I know about it, as much as I don't know about it, has still told me that I'm going to be so frustrated through that experience that I don't want to subject myself or the other people at the table to how I'm going to feel playing that game, and I should just stay away from it. These next two commenters were a bit more pro-scoring, but still looked for other clues in a review. Rebecca said that she's okay with scores, but added that it's the high ones or the low ones that stand out. She also said that she'd much prefer a list of pros or cons with a game and a bit of details as to how it got the score that it did. Derek also said that scores can be helpful, but that they're not the end-all be-all of a particular review. He said that he has learned that the comments within a review mean more than the score, and added that he loves hearing people talk passionately about games, even if they're not necessarily games of interest to him. And I think that's good. It's one thing to think, okay, yeah, I can appreciate a score, but I know that there's a lot more to it that is worth it to me, and that's very important. Penny had a pretty interesting take, suggesting that she looks for consistency across multiple different reviews, saying that seeing several low scores might make her rethink her purchase, while seeing multiple higher scores might make her look at a game even if she had never heard of it. And I'll say that is my approach to games, especially when I'm looking out on Board Game Geek. I will, if I see a game has a 7 or a 6, okay, that's fine, but I'm going to go out and actually look at the numbers. I'm going to see, how many higher numbers versus lower numbers, and more importantly, I think to me, is how many people who gave it a 4 or a 2 or a 1 actually took a moment to explain why. Even if I don't necessarily read every word that I write, that gives me more of an idea that they have actually put thought into that number. And if I just see, a bunch of 1s and 4s where it just says Kickstarter or played once or whatever, and someone who gives it an 8 and gives a long reason as to why they gave it an 8, I'm going to immediately assume that those lower numbers aren't genuine for that very reason. Wonder Flonium said scores can be useful to compare how a reviewer views similar games and to provide overall context of the discussion. And lastly, Jeremy Brooks said that a score wouldn't be his only deciding factor as to whether or not to get a game, suggesting that differing interests in themes or mechanisms might make someone else's 9 a 6 from his own perspective. And I did think it was pretty funny. He ended his comment by suggesting that your own mileage may vary, using the exact words that Teshris said that we should not use in our reviews. I just thought that was entertaining. As I've kind of already chatted about, I don't like to give scores in my videos for a couple things, and a lot of which we've already seen. And as I already mentioned, I don't operate with the mindset that everyone who watches my videos knows who I am. And so if I just say, oh yeah, it's definitely a 5 or it's definitely a 7, I don't feel like that's really sharing any information to the viewer. But there's a much, much bigger reason. And I'm actually surprised I didn't really see it quite written out here in any of these comments. There's a big reason why I think that numbers don't matter. And Jeff Foxwell kind of hinted upon it by saying that it's entirely subjective. But it is subjective, absolutely. I may say a game is a 5 because I really, really dislike the art. Someone else may say that it's a 5. They're completely fine with the art, but they hate that it does a particular mechanism, right? But really what it boils down to, I think, is that there is no basis universally for scoring board games. And I'm going to share this. I'm going to try and make this brief, but I am a BJCP certified beer judge. Now, I'm quite rusty. I haven't done it in a long time, but that is the beer judging certification program, and my ranking is a certified judge. There are 5 rankings. I don't remember what they all are. I think there's like basic or a novice. I don't remember what the second level is. Then there's certified, then there's national, and then there's master. I took a test. I took an exam that was actually proctored by a gentleman by the name of Gordon Strong, who I'll talk about here in a moment, but he literally wrote the book on judging beers. He's got a number of books out there, and I actually have my copy autographed by him. He proctored my exam, and I scored 2 points lower than what I needed to get the national ranking. But even if I got that score, I would have had to have taken another much more detailed written exam in which, if I recall, you have to actually create a beer recipe for a style of a beer just out of your head. They're going to just give you a style, and you've got to write what would it take to make that beer and, kind of like what its stats should be. I'm going to flash something up here in the screen. This is the score sheet from the BJCP program. These are the score sheets that I filled out dozens of these things in my day judging beers. And you're going to see that there are specific criteria. There is aroma, how the beer smells. There is literally appearance. There is flavor. There is mouth feel. And then there's an overall impression. And each of those things has a specific number of points you can award to each of those categories. So appearance is, I think, 3 points. I think mouth feel is like 5 points. Overall impression is 10 points. But above all of this, there is, as I mentioned from Mr. Gordon Strong, a complete set of style guides that says a New England IPA should look like this. It should taste like this. It should have flavors, including things like citrus or maybe pininess. It should have, a thick, hazy look. It should not be transparent. It should be opaque. It should be a dark straw color. It should not have a lot of red in its color. It shouldn't be those darker colors of beers. It shouldn't have a sweetness or any caramel notes. It shouldn't have toasty melanoidin notes. Any of those things that don't belong in that style. It describes how much bitterness it should have, what types of bitterness those styles should have, so on and so forth. And there is that guide for a Russian Imperial Stout, an English Stout, an American Stout. Now there's black IPAs. There's constantly new things being added to that list, just like there are new different types of board games coming out. And there is nothing out there that says a deck building game should have a deck of so many cards and methods by which players can get those cards into their own personal decks, and that we should have certain ways of cycling our decks, and we should have this and that, whatever else. None of that is there. I can say, hey, this is a deck building game, and you might have at least some idea of what that means, but you're still going to have a ton of questions. Well, is it a deck building game where my cards go into my discard? Because I hate those. I love it when they go straight into my deck. Those are much better. Well, either of those are still deck building games. So even then, even if I tell you, yeah, it's a deck building game, and it's a really good one, it still might be a type of deck building game that you can't stand. I love IPA beers, but I don't love the piney ones. I don't love the ones with those kind of onion garlic flavors that the Simcoe hops can impart into the flavor. I like Cascade, I like Amarillo, I like the Citra hops, but both of those can make an IPA. So the other thing is as a beer judge, I might have judged a beer. I might have tasted. I did a couple of IPA category exams, and I said, "Look, this is very piney. It's very onion and garlicky, and I can't stand those flavors. But they are there. They are appropriate to the style. So whether or not I like them, it's still a good beer. It has hit the marks that are established for that style, and therefore it scores whatever points it should have. Now, maybe it had other flavors it shouldn't have, and I will appropriately ding it for that. But that's, I think, in a very detailed nutshell, that's my problem with scoring games, is that there is no construct for what makes a game an 8 or a 10 or a 5 or a 3, even in individual categories like art or the presence of those mechanisms. Voidfall is described as a 4X game. I argue that it is absolutely not a 4X game. There's no exploration. There's no way to actually exterminate your enemies. Yes, there is exploitation. That's there in spades. Yes, there is expansion. Absolutely. But the other two elements are missing. But still, how do I score that? How do I apply that rating to what the game tells us it is? And that's so difficult to do that I'd rather just not do it. I'd rather tell you why I don't think it's a 4X, and let's just leave the numbers out of it completely. And speaking of leaving things out of it completely, I will shut up now. This is a subject I'm really passionate about because I really feel like I've had folks tell me, you don't give scores to your games. I'm like, no, because what's the value if I do? Like, what am I really telling you out of it? Sure, if you really, really know me, or you think you really, really know me, and I say, this game's a 10. Is it my 10? Maybe it's your 2. So why even bother? Anyways, let's get to some recently played games. I suspect I'm going to be editing this video in a little bit going, wow, that was the most animated I have ever been at the end of a question of the week. I even kind of planned some of that stuff to talk about, but even I think I got a little away from myself. Anyways, I hope you guys stuck through that. All right, a couple of games that I played. Actually, I have played a lot of games in the past week. After the past couple of weeks of having a lot of stuff and really being anxious and eager for gaming, I still just didn't get that much gaming done. I kind of made it a point this past week to play a game almost every single day. We goofed Friday because we had to go get my wife her new vehicle. But other than that, I did get a lot of games in. So let me go ahead and open things up with City of Iron. This is from Ryan Lockett. I mentioned this game, I think, in the last episode. I picked it up and I was very eager to try this out because it is listed as, here we go, it's listed as a city building game with a deck building element. And I thought, that's me, right? And then in fact, I went through the rule book, and I'm going to call out Mr. Ty McDonald himself of the Last Command game, because I told him, and I even mentioned in my video, that a deck building game with 2 different decks that you build has got to be the most exciting thing I've ever heard of, and I'd never heard of it before. It's actually in this game. There are 2 different decks that you're building in this game, and I literally, as I read the rule book, I was like, mind blown, because I had never seen another game do it. This one's older than The Last Command. In fact, this is the 2nd edition. However, don't worry, Ty, because I still like The Last Command better. I like the way that it does it better. In this game, you are constructing 2 decks. You've got a civilian deck of these cards that you're playing that kind of give you certain abilities to gather resources, to maybe to do exploration, to do certain things within these towns that you're trying to build up. And then there are military cards that you're building into a military deck, and those are what you're going to use to do fighting. Now, the thing with this was, and honestly, it's been about a week since I played it, and it's already a little bit fuzzy in my mind, but what you're doing, the only thing that you're really working towards is to be producing resources. You're going to be trying to explore new lands. You start with a large land tile in front of you. You put a little district tile on it, and that turns it into a city. So if you've built a district on a land, you now have a city. Just the vocabulary of this game was weird to try and parse through as I was getting through the rulebook. And so throughout the game, you might acquire more lands, and you have to put districts on them right away. You can also add more districts to cities that you already have, because each land card with the districts establishes a number of buildings that you can build in that city. And so you're playing cards out, you're getting these cards from a sort of a market out on the board, and you can get stuff from fighting, but you're generally going to get things by basically paying for them. And they get stacked up into your lands. And as you acquire lands by purchasing them, or acquire, I think they're called villages or towns, by fighting them, you start to get resources. And there's a number of these tracks across the top of the board of each of these different resources. And as you have more of them being generated, you just move up these wheels. And then at certain parts throughout the game, you're going to score simply based on who has the most of those different resources. Now, there is a couple different other ways to get points. Each of the land tiles that you have will give you criteria for endgame scoring, and you can work on those things sort of independently, but there's a ton of points to come from those different resources. And so as my wife and I were playing, I felt that she was just building a better deck than me. I felt that she was kind of a couple of turns ahead of me in what she was doing, but she wasn't really getting a lot of resources out there. She only had control of a couple different types of resources. And even though I may only had one of this or two of something else, she had none. And so I was grabbing a lot of extra points from those things in those scorings. And by the time she kind of realized it, it was already a little too late for her to reverse course and make up that difference. I mentioned in the last episode that I have never played a Ryan Lochte game. This is my first ever Ryan Lochte game that I played. I don't know that I really care much to play it again. There was nothing inherently wrong with it. The theme just wasn't there. You're sort of these anthropomorphized animals. Yeah, I was like the frog faction. The art was cute, but it does have this very sort of dystopian animated, like Netflix cartoon feel to it, if that makes sense. But I never really felt like I was exploring distant lands and trying to build new cities and trying to fill them with all these exciting buildings. I even feel that Everdell has more thematic feel as far as building a town than this did. I didn't dislike it, but nothing that it did made me feel like I can't wait to play it again. When I think about city builders like, again, Everdell, which is abstract, if we're being honest, Suburbia, which is not abstract, the game's fantastic. And when I think about, obviously, other deck builders like The Last Command, stuff like that, all those games do it better than I think this game did, and I'm sure I'm going to try it out at least one more time, but this one's probably going to go back on the trade pile pretty quick. That was City of Iron by Ryan Lochte. All right, talked about that one too much. So here's the next one. Speaking of which, Everdell Farshore. I mentioned recently I got this game as well. I really wanted my wife to check it out, and we really did have a fun time with this game. It really does streamline a lot of the things that the base Everdell does. It just kind of makes a couple things easier to approach. It does still have that challenge, and in fact, it even mentions in the rulebook that your resources are a little harder to come by, but there are other things that are a little easier to come by, particularly, I think, just points and cards. It's a little easier to get cards into your hand. But even I felt like in the first round, you only have like 2 workers to deal with. You take 2, maybe 3 turns, and then you're out already, and you have to pass into the next season. And you just feel like there's so much more you should be doing. Yeah, there's 4 seasons. You feel like they should each be a bit equal in what you can get done in them, and they're really not. Your first season blitzes by, your second one isn't that much longer, then all of a sudden in your last 2, okay, here's the game. Here I'm finally getting to do stuff. And then next thing you know, it's over. Although you still played for 2 hours. But we still really enjoy it. The art in this game is just unrivaled. It is such a beautiful looking game. I love the turn to the sort of aquatic theme versus just the forest theme of the base game. I mean, again, they still look the same. They have the same table presence, the same fantastic art. It's just a different locale, and it works. I love it. We had a good time with this. Again, I thought my wife was doing quite well in this game, and then all of a sudden in that last season, I just took off, got a really nice engine going. I got some nice synergy between cards. The biggest challenge with this game and base Everdell is knowing which cards to keep and which cards to get rid of. And I'm not good at that. I've talked about that before here in the channel. I feel like every card is a card that I want to play. Every card is a card that I want to be able to work with. And at some point, you just have to cut your losses and go, look, I am never going to build this thing. It's much more useful to me to spend it as a resource or whatever I'm going to be able to do with it. Use that card for a different purpose to get this one played, which actually works with everything else that I have going on already, instead of trying to get this one played out later and then hoping that it still fits within my plan. And that's difficult for me. But if you can grasp that, you can do pretty well in a game of Everdell. Farshore, love that game. And I went and picked up some of the deluxe, like some Etsy components to store things, some trays and such to store things in. Looking forward to those coming in. Okay, we played another game of Rabbit Island. I mentioned that we got this one in after we had played it locally. We played this at Center of the Universe Brewing Company past week. I wanted to see if it could actually be played there. And it can be. We had some friends who were there, though, and we kind of got lost in a bunch of conversations. So we ended up having to play the short game of this. My daughter did not have as good of a game of this as she did the first time. She actually came in real hard. My very first turn, she plays a card, makes me blow a bunch of money. And I was like, is that really how you want to start this off? Because, like, you're making enemies already on turn 1. You might want to be careful. And so Mom and I ganged up on her a little bit. But my wife clobbered us in this game, actually. But it was weird, though, because... And I talked about this last time we played this. We did play the short games. That skews our results a little bit. But I think my wife's final score was like 16. and I had, I don't know, 8. I think my daughter had, I don't know, 6. Maybe it was a little bit higher than that. But still, that top score was like 16 points, and the scoreboard goes to 100. So what are we doing wrong? We did still do something a little wrong in the initial setup that actually should have skewed our scores a little higher, and it didn't really seem to have much of an impact. It wasn't a big deal. We were placing out 1 tile instead of 2 as we were kind of building out the map. Anyways, I still think it's a neat game, and I'm sure that we're going to get into this a little bit more. I'd still love to actually get a play of it where we do it correctly. And I still need to try and reach out to the designer and figure out, like, are we supposed to have scores approaching 100? Because we're nowhere near that. Anyways, that is Rabbit Island. All right, what's up next? I did play a couple games last week of Legacy of You. I'm not going to go deep into these. But what I thought was pretty interesting is that I have begun to feel like this game is really easy. I kind of feel like I have figured out the code for this game. Now, honestly, I like these solo games that are generally easy. I like games, okay, they may be a little tricky at the beginning, and then by the end, I'm just absolutely kicking the crap out of my opponents or whatever. That's just how I like to play games. It is what it is. And I feel like I have reached that point with this game, so much so that in my first play, in the same night, I went a little cavalier and I actually lost. Because I was like, I know what I'm doing. I can shed these couple of cards. I can weather the loss. And I could not. And so I lost the game. And when you lose, you get like a little benefit that you get to use in games going forward. My first benefit for the very first time I lost the game, which was the very first time I played the game, was hugely powerful. This new benefit that I got was slightly powerful, not so much. So I immediately just reset and I played it again. And again, just absolutely clobbered the puzzle of this game. There's no AI that you're playing against. Just cards come out and you've got to be able to deal with them. And I had a very, very easy time with it. So I'm still just loving this game. Oh, and I got some fantastic components. You got to see these things. The basic cardboard components of the game have been replaced with these absolutely fantastic resin pieces. I got these from Latvia, of all places, and they actually got here pretty quick. I was surprised how quickly they delivered. They just look fantastic, and they really do. They just kind of add to that fun, physical aspect of that game. I cannot believe how good they look. And they also still fit in the box and all the base compartments and such. So that's pretty nice. All right. Lots of games still here to get through. Up next is Video Game Champion. I played this actually twice. In fact, ironically, I played it twice on Saturday. My wife and I played this, first of all, kind of in the morning. And then I was going over to a buddy's place. I was telling them about it. And they're like, oh, we'd like to try that out. And I just happened to bring it with me. This is a game where, like I said, you're a kid and you're competing to, be the best video gamer. You do this by getting these video game large card, almost like a tarot-sized card of these different games. They're all made up, but I guess a lot of them kind of reference games in that sort of 90s era, 16-bit, graphic games. I played some of those games when I was a kid in the 90s, but honestly not as many as other folks, got to play. So I am just not as familiar with that genre as I feel like I should be. I mean, I was 11-ish, 12-ish, kind of in that time frame, so I should have been playing a ton of games, but we had a Nintendo, that was really it. We never had like an Atari or any of that kind of stuff. Anyways, so you have those cards, and there's a lot of information on these cards. Each game has, there's like 6 different genres of games. There are difficulties of the games. To be able to play a game, you have to turn in these tokens. These they look like the buttons on the right side of most of your video game controllers, and they have different numbers and different colors. And so you have to just put together different arrangements of numbers and or colors to beat these games. Some of them only take 2 tokens. Some of them can take as many as 5. Some of them have to be just colors or just a straight of run of numbers, or both, and those are the quite hard ones. There's also a couple that require like kind of a full house sort of an idea, 3 of one, 2 of another. I think only of numbers. I haven't seen any colors mixed with like the full house concept. And you're drafting those tokens from sort of a display. There is no board to this, but it takes a huge amount of table space, as you can probably see in some of these photos. You're taking those tiles from this display, and whichever tile that you take corresponds to 2 actions, one in the row, one in the column, and you get to pick one of those 2 actions to take. Those actions are doing things like giving you money that then you can use to either go and rent video games or buy them. Actually, you can't ever buy the games. If you want a game, you have to literally beg your parents for a gift, and then you get a bunch of IOUs, and you're using, you have those IOUs, they kind of clog up your your tableau, if you will, because you can only have 8 tiles, only have 8 tokens between those little numbers and colors and those IOUs. So if you have a lot of IOUs, well, then you got a lot of chores you got to get done or homework or whatever, and you can't go and play games, which makes perfect thematic sense. But getting rid of those IOUs is kind of tricky. There's not a lot of ways to do so. There seems to be many more ways to get IOUs than there are to get rid of them. It's very, very hard to make money in the game, which again, you're playing as a kid, so I get it. But through the 2 plays that I've had so far, I have really struggled with this game. I cannot come up with a solid path. I can't come up with like a plan. Okay, I want to get that game played because, well, to get that game played, maybe I have to rent it first. And you only have it rented for a round, which is basically a week. You play over like 5 weeks. So I have to rent the game. To rent the game, I need the money. So I have to do a turn where I get the money. Then I maybe have to do a turn where I get rid of some IOUs. And then hopefully I have enough of the tokens I need to be able to play that game by the time I can actually rent the game. You only get so many actions in a week. In fact, you get 3, and then there's kind of a weekend step that everyone gets to take in turn order where they can go and rent games, and hopefully you have money in place to do it. There were plenty of times that I played this that we just had no money on the weekend and I couldn't go rent games, and so you kind of just sit there and you do nothing. When I played it the second time with my friends who are, very good gamers, they had a much better game of it than I did, although I did manage to come in second place. I was even quite surprised by that. But I just felt like I was floundering the whole time. I felt like I was just struggling to get anything done. And there's a lot of different things you're trying to focus on. Again, trying to get money, trying to rent games, you're trying to get magazines, which also cost money. The magazines kind of help you beat or play these games. There's a concept where you can play a game but not beat it. That makes beating it a little easier next time by kind of giving you like a wild that you can ignore one of those token requirements on a game. You can also use a magazine to ignore a token requirement on a game, but the magazines cost $1. And so it's like, again, there's so many different things trying to take your money. There's also these gems. It's a little bit of a weird element, but I get what they were trying to do. As you play games, especially if they're a new release game, or if you're getting a magazine that's kind of giving you access to new release information, you're putting those gems on a little notepad that really, really well illustrated. Little scribblings and little, doodads on those notepads, and those are going to help give you additional things. Maybe you're going to get some extra tiles. Maybe you're actually going to get some extra money. Maybe you can get rid of some IOUs, or maybe actually you get more IOUs. And that was one aspect of the game. When I tried it the second time, I tried to use sort of the harder side of those notebooks, thinking that would give me a little bit more flexibility, and actually it made the game way harder for me to play, because by getting to check out new games, I somehow gave myself more responsibility, more of these IOUs that clogged up my tableau. And so again, I had to take a ton of turns just getting rid of IOUs so that I could get more tiles. And I don't know, I was really excited to check out this game. It has not sung for me yet. I will definitely try it another time or two. I like the theme. The theme does feel a little bit like it's there. If anything, the sincere pressure of trying to be a kid and still trying to be cool and have fun and enjoy your life while having all the pressures and responsibilities of parents and schools and grandparents to appease and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's there, for better or for worse. Anyways, I'm hoping that I can start to get it, but for the moment, I don't get it. That was Video Game Champion. Up next, we played Sky Team. So like I said, I hung out with my buddies. I do have another game from that day to chat about. I'll get back to it. And that night, a quick side story. I missed my buddy Tinny over the weekend. It kind of hit me a little hard. And so Saturday evening, I was like, look, I'm not ready to come back home and just sit in my recliner in my family room and be sad. So I asked my wife if we could go out. We went to the Cask and Stave little pub that we have here in town, and we played Sky Team. And I was really glad, really thankful that she let us do this. But we played Sky Team again, and we flew to Atlanta. I finally got to play this game with a different airport. And it was fun. It was a little bit more of a challenge, but not too much. You actually have a die that you now roll that makes some extra airplanes kind of show up on your path. You don't know when or where they're going to show up. You can actually possibly sort of skip ahead of that risk and not have to deal with it. We got to do that at least once. But that was really fun. There's also, we played with an intern board that it sits below the main board. It gives you this little, almost like a lanyard with a number on it. And you just have to use those numbers in place of your dice. You get to use it by putting your die on that in-turn little strip and then putting out the lanyard tile that is closest to you. So you have an end and your co-pilot has an end, and you're kind of burning the candle from both ends, so to speak. It doesn't really make the game harder, but there was definitely a timing element. You got to make sure you're using it at the right time. We got a little distracted at first. We kept trying to use them to radio ahead, which was working well, until we were too close to the airport and his numbers were too high, so it wasn't going to work for us. And all of a sudden we're like, well, crap, what are we going to use them for? And I thought, well, hang on a second. We can still use them for anything. It's still either a die value of 4, die value of 5. You're just using it for something in a different way, if that makes sense. So anyways, we managed to fully train the intern. We managed to get all the planes out of the way, and we landed safely in Atlanta, which it didn't really feel rewarding because it's Atlanta. Anyways, that was a fun game, and I'm looking forward to just continuing to sort of explore that. It is a very casual game. It feels more stressful, I think, than it really is, but I enjoy it. That was Sky Team. All right, 2 more, and these ones you have not heard of before. This is Bark Avenue. I played this with my buddy Ricky over the weekend when I went out and before we played Video Game Champion, and I enjoyed it so much they actually let me borrow it, so this is not my copy. And then I played it with my family over the weekend. Now, I'm going to share a couple different stories. There's a lot to talk about here. So first, let me go ahead and talk about the game. This is a game where you are a dog walker, and you're trying to kind of like run your own business walking dogs. You're going to be moving around New York City. It's literally sort of a representation of New York City, a bunch of different neighborhoods, Central Park in the middle, a couple of smaller parks on the outer edges, and you are going around this space, sort of moving from sort of grid location to grid location. You're picking up dogs. You're taking them to go do things that they would like to do. You have to sort of appeal to those dogs. Maybe that dog likes to play in the water, or it likes to play fetch, or it likes to sniff things, and you've got to try and give it opportunities to do that along your walk. But also the owners have certain expectations. Maybe they'd like to see a photo of their dog while you're out and about, or, and this is the really, really funny part, you can't avoid it, maybe the dog needs to poop. And you need to be able to sort of show the owners that, yes, I took the dog on a walk, the dog had fun, I took its photo, and it took a crap. Mission accomplished. Now, those things are optional. You don't have to really do any of them, but when you drop the dog off, if you have managed to accomplish those things, you're going to get $2 each if you get the dog dropped off in time. And whether or not you do, you're going to get reviews. So if you've managed to accomplish something, if that walk, when you've dropped that dog off, has accomplished something. Maybe you've walked the same size of dog 3 times. There's like small, medium, and large. So if you've walked the same size of dog 3 times, well then, hey, you're now an expert in that size of dog. If you've walked one of each size of dog, well then now you're well-rounded and you're familiar with all different types of dogs. And so as you do those things, you kind of have these stars inside of your player board, and they get placed out onto the main board in this sort of column of reviews. And doing that unlocks additional abilities for you, for your little business, if you will. For example, eventually you're going to be able to unlock the ability to walk 3 dogs at once instead of just 2, so on and so forth. There's also coffee shops. You can stop and get a cup of coffee, and you can use that cup of coffee to take an extra action on your turn. There are also dog treats that you can purchase, and those can be used to sort of trick the dog into letting you do things that maybe the dog wouldn't normally want to do. So if a dog really wants to just be by itself, it doesn't like other dogs, you can give it a treat to ignore that. If the dog is a slower dog, you can give it a treat to pep it up and make it, go at any speed you want to go. And all that's great. It's very simple, but it's very, very theme rich. Now, the first time we played this, I had a very good time with it, although it took forever. We played it at 5 players, and Ricky was like, oh yeah, we're gonna be done with this game in like 20, 30 minutes. An hour and a half later, we were finally wrapping it up. But it lists itself as being a Gateway Plus game, and I think it's maybe just a little bit too much plus for Gateway gamers, and we actually had 2, maybe even 2.5, if you will, new gamers there at the table. And I didn't know that at the time. And so there was a decent amount of AP. There was a lot of asking questions that had kind of already been answered, which is fine. I just wasn't really expecting that, and so it was a little bit of I'm really getting bored waiting for my next turn, and then my turn is 5 seconds because I've already planned ahead. Again, it's fine. It's just a difference in personalities. Then he let me borrow it. I took it home and I read the rules, and I was like, wow, we played this game very wrong. We made a ton of mistakes. Ricky made a lot of assumptions in the teach. For example, he said, well, your maximum movement is optional. You can move up to that amount, but you can move any distance you want. That's not true. The dogs are literally pulling you, and you have to move your maximum allowable distance, which is the lowest speed of the dogs that you're walking at that time. So some dogs may want to move 3 spaces, 4 spaces, or 5 spaces. If you have a 3 and 2 5s, you have to move at the 3, but you have to move 3. You can't choose to move 0, 1, or 2, and so we got that wrong. And a bunch of other things, icons that meant different things than what he suggested. And it was kind of funny. I let him know. I was like, hey, we kind of made some mistakes here. But I played this with my wife and daughter. My daughter absolutely loved it. This is a deluxe edition, so it's got lots of wooden components and little squishy rubber poos, which were just hilarious. And I have definitely used the word poop more times in teaching and playing a game than ever before in my entire life. And I'm not looking to change that. I don't need another game to set a new level, that's for sure. In fact, when Ricky was first explaining it, I was almost immediately turned off. I was like, look, if this is going to be one of those, it's going to focus too much on the poop. And it doesn't. It really doesn't. Thematically, it actually makes a ton of sense. And that's really what I've liked about this game. I've talked about this before, the Rock Hard 1977, as an example of a game that is, it's not a big game. It's not a heavy game. It's not a complicated game. But it's just very fun. And what makes it very fun is how well it embraces its theme. And this game nails this theme better than anything that I've ever seen in this genre. The other game is, I think, Dog Park, and that game is just boringly terrible. It's not an interesting game at all. It has all the components and the ideas of a game, but none of it makes sense. Everything here just makes sense, and so we had a lot of fun playing with my family. I have since purchased a copy. Unfortunately, folks, I bought the last deluxe edition of this out on the publisher's website, which is Terra Dice Games. I bought the last deluxe, and there was even some more deluxe components, and I ordered those, but they were out of stock of the one piece. I had to order like the upgraded thing, which is going to give me more than I needed, yada, yada, yada. But they actually emailed me and they said, well, hey, we saw that you ordered this. You don't need all of it. You only need like part of it. If you want, we'll give you a little bit of a discount and just send you what you need. And I was like, yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you so much. So a big nod to Terra Dice for doing that. I was going to buy this game before they did that. So that didn't encourage me to make that purchase. Just marvelous theme. Very, very well done. Beautiful looking game. And fun for the whole family, poop and all. That is Bark Avenue. Looking forward to getting that one in. Last game. We're getting through it, folks. Last game. This is Windward. Now, I got to give a quick backstory on this. Windward, the designer is... I need to find this because it matters. The back of it's upside down, Greg. Sorry. The designer is Hayden Lepiska, and it is illustrated by Justin Spice. However, the publisher of this game is Eldorado Games. Now, Eldorado Games made The Age of Atlantis, which is still my #1 game of all time. I have not played any other games from Eldorado, although I have 2 of them. This one and The Islands of Eldorado, or Island of Eldorado, which I still have not gotten to play. It's right there. I have the deluxe all-in, everything for it. Never gotten to play it. This is a game about whaling. Now, when this was first announced, there was a bit of an uproar on social media, and so they changed it to sky whaling. You're still hunting what looks like big giant whales, except for now they're flying. And so you're going to be going around and trying to hunt these. They're called cresters. And then you sort of process them to get their teeth, and you exchange those teeth for notoriety, and the first person to get 15 notoriety wins the game. And there's a couple other engine building elements. You can hire crew members up to 3. There are 6 different types of crew members, sort of 2 in each of those 3 categories, and so you pick which one you want when you hire. You get to hire whoever you want, but you can't undo that decision later, so you kind of have to decide, do I want to get more for this, or do I want to be able to do this instead? You pick one of those 2 people and you hire them. There is also this element of you get these kind of cards that you can then play. Some of them are going to help you with combat. Some are going to help you move around the board. Some are going to help you be able to do extra certain things, kind of break the rules a little bit. You can only have so many of them. You'll be able to use them at certain points. When you go into combat against other players or these cresters, you're chucking dice based on the strength of your ship, which can be augmented by crew or cards. And all that's fine. And then you kind of play it and you're like, well, there's this whole element of, well, when you're out and about on this desolate planet, you quickly start to lose morale. And if you lose too much morale, you only have 4 morale to get to. If you have no more morale, you literally, like, your ship crashes or sinks or falls apart or whatever. And there's a lot of kind of resetting. You just kind of like start all over again back at the central port. You kind of lose everything that you had, material-wise, cargo-wise. Your crew and all that sort of stick around. But my wife and I tackled this just yesterday. We got a turn in and I was like, I played one turn. I actually managed to defeat a monster, and then my ship blew up because I ran out of morale. Forgot about that. The next turn, we kind of sailed away because you can ride with the wind. There's a whole thing about wind and the wind changing direction, but then you can't get back. And so again, you're sort of stuck away from the port, and your morale starts to plummet. You're like, well, I got to hurry up and get home, or I'm going to lose my damn ship again. And you very quickly realize that the way you have to play this game is making very short, kind of like ninja trips. You got to like run out, hit a thing, and hurry up and get back all in the same turn. But to be able to do that, you can only take like 2 actions on a turn unless the cards let you play more. And so you got to really, really be efficient / lucky to be able to get out, make a fight, process this whale into resources that are worth those points, get back to the port and turn it in. And if you don't, well, then other players can come and attack you. They can basically steal your wares, steal your rewards, and turn them in and get your points. Now, my wife and I don't play like that, so that didn't happen to us, but I've already talked to some friends and read comments online of people saying, yeah, you bust your ass to get this stuff, and then someone just waltzes right up and takes it from you because you threw everything that you had into winning that fight. Now you have no way to really defend yourself, and someone just comes and wipes you out. And I can see that being extremely frustrating. It's also very repetitive because you're just going out and collecting these whale resources and turning them in for points. First 15 wins, which it didn't take us long to do that. Like, I think once we got through the teach, we played the game in an hour, maybe even a little less. Like, it didn't feel like a very long game, but we kind of got done. I was like, well, yeah, I would certainly, now that I kind of understand it, I would play it differently from the get-go, but then I would play it that same way for the rest of the game. I would always play this the same way. Now, there's expansions for this. They did another Kickstarter. Unfortunately, the guy kind of went out of business. He kind of just quit caring about it. A lot of people didn't get their pledge from that last Kickstarter. Copies of it are available online. They're incredibly expensive, over $200. Some people are trying to sell this for $400 for the all-in of that last Kickstarter. And I just don't see the value in it. I don't see the value in getting all that stuff. It might add a little bit more flair to it, but I suspect it's still going to be a very repetitive game. Yeah, I was hoping to see a little bit more out of this. I really didn't, and that is Windward. Alrighty, that is it for recently played games. So, and I don't have anything else for the video, so let's go ahead and get into question for next week. The question for next week. Now, I didn't actually talk about this when I mentioned City of Iron, and that was a big mistake. City of Iron does a bidding system. Let me pull that box back up here very quickly. City of Iron does a bidding for turn order mechanism. There's a bunch of different ways I've seen games do this. One of them that sticks to mind is Archipelago, where you actually are spending money. You kind of do like a blind auction. Boom, here's how much money I want to spend, and then whoever is the highest bidder gets to then set the turn order for that round. In this game, much like the game of what's it called? It is called the winemaking game. What the hell's the name of that game? Viticulture. Sorry. In the game of Viticulture and here in City Iron, you kind of have like a little track. And you're saying, okay, well, I want to go here. I want this to sort of be my turn order. And maybe I get like a little bonus, or maybe I have to spend money to be able to be in that turn order. And then other people can choose whether they want to spend more to beat you in turn order, or maybe go lower in turn order and get a little benefit out of that track. There weren't any major benefits in this. I think you got 1 coin if you went lower on the track. Otherwise, you had to get nothing or spend money to go sooner. That was basically it. So my question for the week next week is, how do you feel about board games in which you bid on turn order? Do you like certain mechanisms of bidding for your turn order, or would you rather just not do that at all? That is a question for next week. And folks, that is the end of episode number 52 of the Weekly Ratchet. Thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate all the comments from last week. Hopefully we'll have some really good discussion coming up next week, and I look forward to chatting then. Cheers.